So let me share with you. Okay, this is a KIG pathway diagram, and I would suggest that people really do go and have a look at this KIG pathway. It's a very interesting little thing to play with. It is interactive. You can do all sorts of things with it. For example, if I mouse over this thing here called, up at the top here, can you see my mouse pointer? Yeah, okay. So I'm now circling a molecule called acetyl coenzyme A, which anyone with any knowledge at all on biochemistry will know that is the basic starting point. That is the basic building block of all of our metabolism. When we eat food, be those carbohydrates, proteins, fats, or indeed alcohols actually as well, those things are broken down by our metabolism basically to units of acetyl coenzyme A. Now we can oxidize that acetyl coenzyme A for energy, react it with oxygen, and that produces carbon dioxide plus water, releases energy, and that energy is used to make ATP from ADP plus PI. So that's one of the things we can do with acetyl coenzyme A. It's the first intermediary of the tricarboxylic acid or Krebs cycle, if you like. But also, acetyl coenzyme A is a building block that we can start building other things back up from. Once we've broken our food down into acetyl coenzyme A, we can then use that acetyl coenzyme A to make things. For example, we can use an enzyme called 2, 0.3, 0.1, 0.9 to make acetyl coenzyme A. So let me just show you how this thing works. We can just mouse over this here, and there you see a diagram of acetyl coenzyme A, where the coenzyme A part is parsimoniously just written as CoA there. It's actually a massive, great big molecule to which that other bit is stuck, the functional bit being that tiny little bit, and the and the coenzyme A being this great big thing. We can also mouse over the enzyme there, and we can actually click on that, and it will take us to another page that shows us the chemical reaction. It shows the enzyme, it shows the exact CGT, CD, AGTD, the exact genetic code for that enzyme, etc., etc., etc. We can mouse over here, and we get, here's the product of the reaction of 2 acetyl coenzyme A molecules to make an acetyl coenzyme A, which is the first step. Here's another enzyme, and that leads down here, basically either 1 or 2 steps down that metabolic pathway from the very base molecule, the acetyl coenzyme A. We then have a thing called 3-hydroxy-3-methylglutarol coenzyme A. So that's the second most complex, or third if you like, if you count acetyl. That's the second or third most complex thing in our metabolic tree. So it's right at the very base of our metabolic tree, this thing here. So why am I focusing on this thing here? There's what it looks like that. Well, because basically this enzyme here, which in humans is called 1.1.1.34, that one there, that's the enzyme that statins act on. So basically, absolutely everything downstream of that entire pathway, or that entire enzyme there, everything downstream of that is downregulated by the fact that you are taking a statin. What is a statin designed to do? A statin is designed to reduce the level of cholesterol in your blood. In other words, to interfere with what your genes are doing and what they have been doing for 3,800 million years, knowing exactly what they're doing. Here is a little drug that's been invented in the last few years, really, which interferes with that process and basically knocks down the activity of absolutely everything downstream of that point in every branch of the metabolic pathway of the person that's taking that statin.
So,
okay.
Question?
Oh, yes.
How efficient are statins at reducing the enzyme activity? I guess that there is a range depending on what statins you're taking, etc.
There is a range from statin to statin. There is an inter-individual range, absolutely. It seems like you can get 30-35% reductions in your fasted blood cholesterol level. Now remember, this drug acts directly on the molecule cholesterol being produced. This drug has no direct effect whatsoever on any of the lipoprotein carriers, the things that are actually being blamed for the heart disease in the first place. Nobody's blaming cholesterol. They're blaming lipoproteins, and then it's actually only oxidized or glycated ones. This drug does not affect that directly at all. It does have an effect because your body senses that your cholesterol level is lower, so therefore it transcribes, it produces less carrier, because if you've got less cholesterol, then you've got less need for carrier to carry that cholesterol. But that doesn't mean that's a good thing, because you're interfering with what your body is trying to do. For example, let's say you have an inflammatory process going on in your vascular epithelial cells, precisely because you've been eating a pro-inflammatory diet, living a pro-inflammatory lifestyle. Your epithelial cells are upset, there is damage, there is injurious processes that have gone on there. Now, remember what I said about the amount of cholesterol that is in, the role of cholesterol in the integrity of the cell walls, the cell membranes, I should say. It turns out that the amount of cholesterol in every cell membrane equates to about 50%, 1/2 of the weight of everything in that cell membrane. Cholesterol is vastly, vastly important to cell membranes. If you have damaged cells that are trying to repair themselves, they're going to want a lot of cholesterol delivered, which means your cholesterol level is going to be high in your blood, because your body will be making it from acetyl coenzyme A precisely to repair the damage that's being done. And also your body will be producing transporters to get it there so that it can do that job repairing. So you take a statin and you are interfering with your body's natural healing process. You are knocking down its ability to do precisely what it absolutely should do. But it doesn't end there in terms of the problem, because, well, let's find cholesterol, shall we, on this chart. So up here, this is where the statin works, right up here, yeah? So 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, a 4th step, a 5th step. Not even on this page. We have to go to another page. Then we need to go to steroid biosynthesis.
Which is the next tab.
Which is the next tab. This one here. Thank you for that. Okay, and then there's all these steps here. Steppity, steppity, steps, steppity, step, step, steps, all this kind of stuff. There's cholesterol at the bottom of the second page. Many, many steps below where that drug acts. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that is sidelined to that, if we go back to our first tab here, that is deleteriously or negatively affected by knocking down this enzyme all the way up here. So let me give you some examples of it. Over here, we have a bunch of different things which are collectively referred to as the prenylated proteins. They are vital in the correct folding of proteins for enzymes, among other things. Your cell cannot function well or optimally if you cannot fold proteins the right way to make enzymes the right shape to catalyze the right reactions. So that's going to have a whole bunch of negative effects on cell function, a whole bunch of completely unpredictable effects in each individual person, depending on the balance of this, that, and the other thing. But that is definitely not a good thing. If you knock down prenylated proteins enough, you can actually kill a cell stone dead. And in fact, that is one of the areas where cancer researchers are looking to find specific prenylated proteins that they can knock out in cancer cells to kill those cancer cells off, for example. But if you have a healthy, functioning, normal cell and you knock down the prenylated proteins in that cell, then you knock down that cell's function and you cause that cell to become distressed. And cell distress is not a good thing in terms of how that pans out in terms of overall body function. So that's a serious side effect that you potentially expose yourself to if you are foolhardy enough to take these dangerous toxins known as statins. Okay, so that's that one there. Down here, we've got the steroid synthesis. That's where you've got the knockdown of the actual cholesterol molecule itself. And we can deal with some of the issues of knocking down cholesterol itself in a minute. But in the meantime, let's look at some of these side chain issues as well. So we've got the prenylated proteins. Down here, we've got the N-glycan biosynthesis down at the bottom left-hand here. N-glycans do a lot of different roles in cells as well, but probably their primary role is in the function of your immunoglobulins. So if you take a statin and you knock down your ability, therefore, to produce immunoglobulins that function properly, then you may well be affecting your ability to mount an effective defense against infection. So that can't possibly be a good thing either. Okay. Over here, down at the bottom right, we've got ubiquinone and other terpenoid quinone biosynthesis here. That's where you make all your respiratory chain coenzymes, like, for example, ubiquinone, coenzyme Q10. In other words, this is why we say, those of us that know how this thing works, that statins are a dangerous mitochondrial poison. They knock down your ability to produce coenzyme Q10. Coenzyme Q10 is vital in the respiratory chain, in the electron transport chain. Without that, it knocks down your ability to produce energy, to undertake antioxidant activity. It can cause rhabdomyolysis in high energy cells like muscle cells. In other words, they can cause muscle cells to die, to break down, to split open, to cause all sorts of issues going on with those. Now, statins are supposed to protect your heart, and your heart is a muscle. So actually, here's a drug that supposedly is protecting your heart from a disease, when actually it's, if anything, it's likely to increase your risk of having heart disease. And at the very least, many people who take statins experience muscle pain, stiffness, things that feel like fibromyalgia, that kind of stuff. And it's because this drug is basically tearing down their ability to produce energy in those muscle cells. Very, very bad, very, very dangerous. You can cause irreversible damage to skeletal muscles, smooth muscles, and indeed cardiac muscles by taking statin drugs. Not good at all. What else have we got on here? We've also got an inability.
Just a question, if that's
yes,
okay.
Please, absolutely, yes.
So whenever they prescribe statins, as far as I know, they usually recommend that you take Q10 with that as a supplement. Yep. How efficient is that in preventing any sort of mitochondrial damage or damage to the ability of making energy?
Unknown. Well, it's unknown, and I'll tell you why. Because as far as I'm aware to date, and I did do a quick search this morning, a cursory search, I was not able to identify any literature where they have identified a transporter anywhere in the human digestive system that can absorb whole coenzyme Q10 as ingested. What happens when you ingest coenzyme Q10? Your body goes, oh, there's a protein, I'm going to split it down into its amino acids. Those amino acids will then be absorbed into my blood, and then my body will use those amino acids to make whatever proteins that it sees fit based on its normal metabolic function. Whoops, it's unable to make coenzyme Q10 because the statin knocks it down. I doubt very much that supplementing with coenzyme Q10 would be remotely effective in ameliorating the very serious risks of damage to your skeletal muscle and indeed your cardiac muscle from taking statins. So that's the answer to that one as I understand it.
Cool.
If others know more about that than myself and have seen that there are transporters, then please do let us know underneath this video so that I can update my knowledge on that. But as it stands, that seems to be what the situation is there. What else have we got on here? Under the ubiquinones here, the coenzyme, the Q10, all that kind of stuff, all the Qs, not just 10, but all of them actually, 10 being the most important, I suppose. Also down here, that knocks down your ability to produce vitamin K and other clotting cofactors and clotting complement, basically. So, you know, that's another potential problem. Not necessarily a good thing. A lot of the physicians are saying, well, that's great because it means you're less likely to have blood clots, etc., etc., etc. To which, of course, we say, well, instead of knocking down your ability to produce blood clots, why don't we deal with the thing that's causing the disease process in the first place, which is chronic systemic inflammation and not cholesterol in the blood? Anyway, that would be way too logical, I guess, and perhaps not remotely as effective at generating income for companies that produce statin medications and thereby provide physicians with kickbacks and things for prescribing lots and lots of jolly good statins to people. So those are kind of some of the side chain issues there. If we now go back to the next tab again, where we came up with, well, here's cholesterol all the way down here. What we now can also see is that our ability to produce bile acid is dependent on our level of cholesterol, because bile acid is synthesized directly from cholesterol. So if you take a statin, you are now going to be less likely to be able to metabolically deal with fat in your diet. You're more likely to suffer all sorts of secondary problems around that, including your inability to absorb and use any of the fat-soluble nutrients and vitamins and things that you need. Well, there's going to be a problem potentially. You are unable to break down excess steroid in your system as well. So you're now going to have a potential regulation issue there. You're not going to be able to produce enough steroid hormones. And what am I talking about? Well, the most important ones there are estrogen for women and testosterone for men. So that's going to subject you, if you're a woman, to a higher likelihood of osteopenia, osteoporosis, fractures, and secondary problems associated with that, up to and including death. Because actually one of the largest causes of death in aged women are blood clots, which are a direct result of fractures of the hip of femur, pretty much, which is also made more likely in older age, both in men and in women, by the fact that you have a less ability for your brain to function properly, for your vestibular function to function properly, to actually be able to sense where your head is in relation to the rest of your body and the gravitational field. You're more likely to fall over. And you're more likely to fall over if your neurons are not working properly. For neurons to work properly, they require effective insulation. The insulation that neurons use is called myelin. They're called myelin sheaths. And myelin is biosynthesized directly from, you guessed it, cholesterol. So the statin will knock down your ability to myelinate and use your neurons effectively. Added to that as well, there is a very, very serious and invariably fatal neurodegenerative disease known as ALS, which there has been at least one epidoodly-moodly gemology study done on, where they had a statin population and a non-statin population who were match-paired reasonably well otherwise, and the risk ratio differential between statin takers and non-statin takers for ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. If you take a statin, your risk of that invariably fatal neurodegenerative disease goes up. But not even a little bit. It goes up by 16,700%. Gosh, I wonder why. Maybe it's to do with the direct effect that statins have on neuron degeneration and myelin sheathing and all that kind of stuff.
Do you know how many % of statin takers are actually suffering from ALS, though?
It's a very small number. However, when you want to talk about relative risk ratios instead of absolute, 16,700 is impressive. That's enough to have a look at and go, the incidence goes up here markedly. So while ever the absolute incidence is very low, as you quite rightly point out there, Pim, it is still massively, massively higher in that population. So the number of people who take statins that get ALS is probably very low. But the number of people who don't take statins and get ALS is massively lower than that. And given that ALS is invariably fatal, I think that's a serious concern. And we'll get rid of this chart in a minute so that we can chat a bit more, but you've also got all sorts of other effects when you lower your cholesterol production around things like you can't produce enough vitamin D2. Obviously, it affects your ability to make vitamin D3 because that comes directly, both of those come directly from cholesterol as well. And vitamin D3 is the most important cofactor for all the other enzyme functions throughout your entire metabolic pathway. So basically what we have here in terms of statins is we have a dangerous, contraindicated, metabolic and direct mitochondrial toxin which knocks down your ability to produce cholesterol, the thing that your body has designed a process to do over 3,800 million years. Nobody is even suggesting that cholesterol is causing a problem in the first place. They're suggesting it's the transporters. This drug does not act on the transporters. It acts on the cholesterol, thus reducing the production of transporters. The effect that statins have, when you look at the epidemiology that's been done, you will find that populations of individuals who take statins enjoy a statistically significant, but in absolute terms, very, very small reduction in the reoccurrence of heart disease following an initial event. Okay, so what I'm saying is, well, let's break down the epidemiology as it exists accurately so that people know what it says. Basically, it says if you are a man and you are over 65 years of age and you have already had a heart attack, then statins are associated with a lower second heart attack rate. Very, very small amount, not even a huge effect. Okay. If you are a woman of any age, that data does not apply to you. There is no evidence in support of reducing cholesterol having any effect on heart disease in females. None. Okay? If you are a man who is under 65 years of age, that data does not apply to you either. There is no evidence in support of it for under 65-year-olds. If you have not already had a heart attack, then it does not apply to you either. This only applies if you have already had a heart attack and you're a male and you're over 65. That is the only epidemiology that actually supports any meaningful effect on heart disease outcomes in any patient group. Okay. That being said, why does that happen? Well, it happens because one of the side chain things that also comes out from that first chart in the prenylated proteins area is that it knocks down one of the inflammatory pathways, which is highly involved in the chronic systemic inflammation around heart disease development. So what we're saying is the drug actually works on inflammation. It's an anti-inflammatory. And the drug designers never had that intention in mind. It's just a serendipitous thing that has happened by the virtue that they've knocked out an enzyme so high up on the tree that while it has all this negative effects over here, there's this one tiny little positive thing around inflammation. Okay, so why not just take an anti-inflammatory that doesn't have all this negative side effect stuff and achieve the same thing? One wonders. Well, it's because they still want to say cholesterol is the problem, and it never was. They still want to say that native lipoproteins are the problem, and they never were. They still are ignoring the fact that the problem is oxidation and glycation of the transporters, not the fact that the transporters exist. They still want to push that barrier because it's still profitable, massively profitable. I think in the US alone, I think statin medications are profitable to the tune of billions of US dollars a year. And so these drug companies are not going to let go of this one easily. They're going to keep telling physicians that LDL is the problem and keep coming up with pseudoscientific, ridiculous, associative, nonsensical garbage to support that completely unsupportable argument. And they're going to jealously guard that source of income for as long as they possibly can manage to do so. So that's basically the story on the statin medications, how they work, etc.